Alright, quick hello. This is an original Tales First story about a family crossing a line and learning their consequences. Let's begin.
On Christmas Eve, my 7-year-old found a note from my parents. "We're off to Hawaii. Please move out by the time we're back." Her hands were shaking. I didn't shout. I took my phone and made a small change. They saw what I did and went pale. The first thing I heard was a whisper that wasn't really a whisper. Mama, wake up." I cracked one eye open. My room was still dark, the kind of dark that means it has no business being morning yet. I grabbed my phone off the nightstand without even looking and squinted at the time. 5:58 a.m. Of course, because if you're going to have your life fall apart, it might as well happen before 6 a.m., while your brain is still buffering and your mouth tastes like regret. My daughter Grace stood beside the bed in her pajamas, hair sticking up like she'd slept inside a blender. Her cheeks were wet. Her little hands were clenched around a piece of paper like it might bite her. "What's wrong?" I asked, voice thick. I pushed myself upright, already scanning her face the way moms do, checking for blood, checking for fever, checking for, "Did you throw up somewhere?" She shook her head hard, like she couldn't get the words out. "Look," she whispered, and held the paper toward me with both hands. Her fingers were shaking. I took it from her carefully, like it was something fragile and sharp at the same time. My eyes moved over the handwriting and I felt my stomach drop in slow motion. It wasn't a long note. It didn't need to be. "We're off to Hawaii. Please move out by the time we're back." That was it. No Merry Christmas. No love you. Not even a smiley face, which, honestly, might have been worse. I stared at it for a second too long, hoping I'd wake up and realize this was a weird dream brought to me by late-night cheese. Grace sniffed. "I found it on the table," she said, voice tiny. "I think it's from Grandma and Grandpa." My brain tried to scramble into the shape of logic. "Okay," I said slowly, because I was still half asleep and I needed a word to hold on to. "Okay. Maybe it's a joke." Grace's eyes filled again. "Is Grandma mad at me?" "No," I said instantly. Too fast. Too sharp. I forced my voice down into something calm. "No, baby. This isn't about you." I didn't know that for sure yet. But I was not about to let my 7-year-old carry adult cruelty on Christmas Eve at 6 in the morning. I swung my legs out of bed and stood up. The floor was freezing. Of course it was, because the universe loves a theme. "Stay here," I told her gently. "Okay? I'm just going to look." Grace nodded, wiping her face with her sleeve like a tiny, exhausted accountant. I walked out into the hallway, and my chest tightened immediately, because it wasn't just quiet. It was emptier than quiet. No clinking in the kitchen, no TV murmuring, no footsteps, no voices, no, "Oh, I didn't think you'd be up this early," which my mom normally loved to say right before asking me for something. I went to the living room first, like maybe they were all sitting there waiting to surprise us. Nothing. I turned toward the entryway and my brain started doing inventory without permission. Yesterday, there had been suitcases lined up by the front door. My parents had been talking about sunscreen and passports. Now? The space by the door was blank. The hooks were nearly bare. No travel jackets, no dad's stupid vacation hat that he wears like it's a personality trait. I moved to the window that faced the driveway, the one where you can usually see my parents' car like a loyal dog. The driveway was empty. No car. No luggage. No nothing. For a moment my brain went, "Oh, okay." They left. Without me. Without Grace. They left. I stood there, staring out the window like the car might reverse back in if I looked hard enough. It didn't. I forced myself to breathe in slowly. Then I did what any person does when reality starts acting suspicious. I called. Mom first, straight to voicemail. Dad next. Voicemail. I called again because denial is free. Voicemail. I went back to my room where Grace was still standing in the same place, like she hadn't moved a single inch since I left. She looked at me with the kind of hope that hurts. "Are they here?" she asked. I swallowed. "Not right now." Her face crumpled. She pressed her lips together hard, trying not to cry louder. My chest clenched again. "Okay," I said softly. "Hey, I'm going to call Aunt Bella, okay?" Grace nodded, but her eyes didn't stop shining. I stepped into the hallway so Grace wouldn't hear everything. Not because I wanted to hide things from her, but because some things aren't meant to land on a child's heart. I called my sister Bella. It rang twice. Then Bella answered like she'd been awake for hours, which, knowing her, was a personal insult. "Yeah?" she said. "Bella," I said, keeping my voice even. "Where are Mom and Dad?" A pause. Not long. Just enough to tell me she was checking whether she should pretend ignorance. Then she sighed, bored. "Oh, you found the note." My stomach turned. "You knew." "Obviously," Bella said. "We all decided." "We all decided," I repeated, because sometimes repeating insanity out loud helps your brain accept it. Bella sounded amused. "Jess, you're 31. I closed my eyes. "Bella." "No," she cut in, voice sharpening. "Seriously, you're 31 and you still live with Mom and Dad. It's embarrassing." My grip tightened on the phone. "I moved in to help you." Bella laughed once, like that sentence was cute. "That's not a real reason. You're an adult. You should have your own life." I looked down the hallway. Grace's door was still cracked open. I could hear the tiniest sound, sniffling. She was listening. I lowered my voice. "We were supposed to go to Hawaii together." Bella's tone turned lighter, like she was explaining an event cancellation at school. "It's adults only," she said. "We thought it'd be better. And honestly, this gives you time to move out in peace while we're gone. Less awkward, less drama." I stared at the wall. "Let me talk to Mom," I said. Bella exhaled, dramatic. "Fine." I heard movement on the line, then the click of speakerphone, then my mother's voice, bright and decisive, like she was announcing something helpful and normal. "Jessica," she said, as if I'd called to ask for a cookie recipe. "Hi." "Hi," I said, and my voice was quiet. "Is this real?" Mom made a sound like she was the one being inconvenienced. "Bella explained it. We thought it would be best." "Best for who?" I asked. "For everyone," Mom said quickly. "You can move out without us in your way. You can do it peacefully, and we can have a proper trip." "A proper trip," I repeated. "On Christmas. Without us." Mom ignored that. "You're an adult, Jessica." I breathed out slowly. "Grace found your note." Mom's voice softened just a fraction. "Oh, well, she'll be fine. She's with you." I felt my jaw tighten. "She's 7. "And you're 31, Bella snapped through the speaker, like she couldn't help herself. I swallowed down something bitter. "We already paid for the trip," I said. "We paid for our room." Mom's answer came too fast, like she'd rehearsed it. "That's fine," she said. "Bella's best friend wanted to come. There weren't extra rooms. We gave her the room." My head snapped up. "You mean Brooke?" "Yes," Mom said, pleased. "Brooke. She's been Bella's best friend since freshman year. She's basically family." The words hit like a slap. "She's family," I repeated slowly. Bella chimed in, smug. "She is. She's been there for me." I heard Grace's door creak slightly. I could feel her presence like a little shadow behind me. "So, Brooke is family," I said, voice so calm it scared me. "But me and Grace aren't?" Mom's tone sharpened instantly. "Don't say it like that." I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was the kind of sentence people say when they know exactly what they're doing. "What do you want me to do?" I asked. "Where am I supposed to go?" "You'll figure it out," Bella said brightly. "You're an adult." Mom made that same dismissive sound again. "You've had a cushy setup long enough." "A cushy setup," I repeated, tasting the words. Bella went on, warming up like this was her moment. "It's just, you living there is weird. You're 31. It's embarrassing. You're making us look—" "Look what?" I cut in, and my voice finally cracked. "Like you have a single mom in the house who helped you pay for school? Is that what's embarrassing?" Mom snapped, "Jessica!" Bella snapped, "See? Drama." And in that moment, something inside me clicked. Not rage, not tears, just clarity. I didn't argue anymore. I didn't explain. I didn't plead. I said very softly, "Okay, noted." Then I ended the call. The silence that followed felt heavy. I walked back into my room. Grace was sitting on the edge of the bed now, face wet, hands tucked into her sleeves. She looked up at me like she'd been holding her breath the whole time. "Are we in trouble?" she whispered. My throat tightened. "No," I said immediately, crossing the room in 2 steps and pulling her into my arms. "No, sweetheart, we are not in trouble." She clung to me like she was afraid I'd disappear too. "Are they kicking us out?" she asked, voice shaky. Is it about me? Grandma doesn't want me there?" I held her tighter. "No," I lied gently, because the truth was too big and too sharp to put in a 7-year-old's hands. "It's not about you. None of this is your fault." Grace sniffed. "But it's Christmas." "I know," I said, kissing her hair. "And we're still going to have Christmas." I pulled back, wiped her cheeks with my thumbs, and forced my voice into steady. "Listen to me," I said. "We're okay. We're going to be okay." Grace nodded, but she didn't look convinced. I glanced down at the note again, then at my phone. I didn't cry. I took my phone. And I did something on it, quietly, carefully, without telling anyone. When they realized what I'd done, their lives started to unravel. To understand why I didn't beg or negotiate or try to talk it out like a normal person, you have to understand one thing. My family didn't become like this overnight. They'd just never been this blunt about it. I was an only child until I was 11, and I know how that sounds. Poor little only child. But I'm not saying it for sympathy. I'm saying it because when you're the only kid, you don't have a comparison chart. When it was just me, I thought my parents were decent. They weren't warm and fuzzy. They weren't the kind of parents who sat on the floor and played with dolls, but they fed me. They took me to school. They showed up. They were fine. I had nothing to compare fine to. Then Bella was born, and suddenly it was like my parents had been swapped out with a completely different set of adults who had apparently discovered joy, patience, and me. And money. All the things I wasn't allowed to do, Bella could do. All the money they didn't have when I needed something. Somehow, magically, money existed when Bella wanted it. And Bella wasn't just treated well. She was treated like a tiny royal. Her tantrums were big feelings. My emotions were attitude. Her messes were cute. My mistakes were careless. I remember watching it like a science experiment I didn't sign up for. And the most embarrassing part? I tried to explain it away. Because what else do? You don't want to believe your parents love your baby sister more than you. You don't want to look like the jealous older kid. So I told myself things like, they're older now, they're calmer, they learned from raising me, they're in a better financial situation. People change. I kept trying to make it make sense. And then I got assigned my role. Helper, third adult, built-in babysitter. I did diapers, I did bottles, I did watch your sister while I run errands, I did hold her while I cook, I did you're older, you understand. By the time I was a teenager, it wasn't can you help, it was you need to help. And as soon as I could work, I was contributing to the household. Not in a cute summer job spending money way, in a you live here too way. Bella never did. Bella was the investment. Bella was the future. Bella was the one who needed things. I was older. I was expected to manage. And I got used to it. That's the part people don't understand. You don't wake up one day and think, wow, I'm being treated unfairly. You wake up and think, this is normal. This is what families do. I went to community college nearby because that's what my parents said we could afford. No money for anything fancy, my mom told me, like she was doing me a favor by saying it gently. So I did community college. I lived at home. I worked. I kept my head down. I built a decent profession. I started making okay money. I married young. I had Grace at 24. And then, because life likes to keep things spicy, I got divorced around 3 years ago. I'm not going to turn this into a divorce story. That's not what this is. I'll just say it didn't work out. But here's what I didn't expect. After the divorce, life got good. I got my own apartment. It wasn't huge, but it was quiet. It was safe. It was just me and Grace. No passive-aggressive comments, no guilt, no being told I owed everyone my labor. For the first time in my life, I wasn't bracing for someone to demand something from me. And then my parents called. It started with that tone, the we're being reasonable tone. Bella had gotten accepted into a fancy university, not a community college, not the close-to-home option, a real one, an expensive one, and it required tuition and living away. Mom told me how hard it would be for Bella to afford it, even if my parents gave her what they could. Dad told me Bella might have to work too much. It would ruin her experience. And then the question came, wrapped in guilt and sugar. Can you help? I remember staring at my kitchen wall in my little apartment while Grace colored at the table. How? I said. I'm a single mother. Mom's answer was smooth. You could move in with us. Of course. Move back into the house I'd spent my adulthood trying to escape, so I could bankroll the child they loved more than me. We'll give you a big room, Mom said. We'll help with Grace. You'll save so much money on rent, and then you can use that money to help your sister. Bella's future. Bella's dream. Bella's everything. And I didn't want to. I want that on record. I didn't want to move back. I liked my peace, but I was primed for this my whole life. I'd been trained to help Bella, to sacrifice, to excuse. So I agreed. I moved in about 1.5 years ago, and I did what I said I'd do. Bella's university billed everything through one student account: tuition, student housing, and on-campus living costs. A private student loan covered part of that total. I co-signed that loan. Whatever the loan didn't cover, I paid directly. My card was on the university portal, and every month I covered the remaining balance. That was the deal. That was the whole reason I was there, and somehow, shockingly, they forgot that part almost immediately. Within just a few months, the story shifted. It became, Jessica is 31 and still lives with her parents. It became, we're helping you. You're lucky. It became, Bella calling me a leech, a loser, embarrassing. And my parents? They started acting like babysitting Grace in the same house was some heroic charity project, like Grace should be grateful they tolerated her. Grace felt it. Not in big, obvious moments. In the little ones, the sighs, the I'm busy, the way Mom's smile didn't reach her eyes when Grace asked for attention. Grace started getting quiet around them, the same kind of quiet she had this morning with that note, and standing there on Christmas Eve, watching my daughter's hands shake because she thought her grandparents didn't want her. I realized something that made my stomach twist. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about my child, and I wasn't going to teach her that love means begging to be included. Grace stayed upset for a while, not the dramatic screaming kind, the quiet, wounded kind, the kind where she followed me from room to room like she was afraid if she let me out of her sight, I'd disappear too. I kept my voice light around her, even when my insides felt like they were vibrating. "Hey," I told her, brushing her hair back. "You know what?" She sniffed. "What?" "Moving somewhere just us?" I said. "That could actually be really nice." Grace's face scrunched up in confusion. "But Grandma's house—" "I know," I said. "But imagine a place where nobody makes you feel like you're in trouble for existing." She stared at me like I'd just offered her a unicorn. I didn't say anything else. I didn't want to dump adult rage into her little body. I just kissed her forehead and said, "We're going to be okay." Then I picked up my phone again, because step 1 was feelings. Step 2 was logistics, and I'm very good at logistics. I started with Hawaii. I opened the booking confirmation in my email, found the charge on my banking app, and called the number on the back of my card. I told them calmly that my name was on the reservation and I wasn't the one using it. I froze the card, started the dispute, and made sure my payment info wasn't attached to anything they could keep accidentally enjoying. If my family wanted an adults-only trip, they could pay for it like adults. Then I went into the university portal, the same university account I'd been paying through every month. Tuition, dorm, meal plan, everything bundled together, quietly pulling money from my account like a standing order I'd stopped noticing. Usually around $900 at a time. I removed my card from the payment page and shut off the automatic withdrawals. No announcement, no warning, just a few taps and a confirmation screen. I didn't tell anyone. I set my phone down, looked at Grace, and said, "Okay, we're doing Christmas." Not the version my parents had decided for us. Our version. I called Lauren, one of the few mom friends I trust without needing to explain everything. She has a daughter Grace's age. They've been inseparable since kindergarten. She answered on the second ring. "Are you safe?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "But I need a Christmas rescue." There was a pause. Then her voice sharpened, instantly protective. "Bring Grace," she said. "Emma's going to lose her mind if she sees her. Come over. We'll figure it out." By mid-morning, Grace was sitting on Lauren's couch with a mug of hot chocolate like she belonged there. Emma shoved a Santa hat onto Grace's head like she was claiming her. Lauren's living room smelled like cinnamon and normalcy. No passive-aggressive sighing. No, "We're doing you a favor." No note on the table telling a 7-year-old she was unwanted. Grace laughed for the first time that day. A real laugh. The kind that makes your throat tighten because you didn't realize how much you needed to hear it. We spent Christmas with Lauren and Emma. We ate too much. We watched movies. We made jokes about how Santa probably needed therapy. Grace fell asleep on the couch with crumbs on her cheeks and a stuffed animal tucked under her arm. And for one day, I felt something close to relief. After Christmas, I moved fast, not recklessly, just decisively. I went straight to rental listings with one filter on, available immediately. There are more of those than people realize if you're not trying to impress anyone. I found a modest 2-bedroom that had been sitting empty for a few weeks. I showed up with everything landlords like to see: steady income, clean paperwork, no drama. I viewed it, applied that day, and a few days later I was handed the keys. By the end of the week, Grace and I were already sleeping somewhere new. And that's when I started packing what was actually mine. Apparently, "you live here too" meant furnishing the house. Within weeks of moving in, my parents had opinions. The couch was tired. The chair was bad for Dad's back. The coffee table didn't reflect us. So I paid $2,000 for a couch they picked, a chair that cost nearly a month's rent, a heavy coffee table no one needed but everyone admired. All of it on my card because I was being helped. They loved those pieces, used them daily, took pride in them, made jokes about how I should be grateful to sit on something so nice. When I moved out, I took every single thing I'd paid for: the couch, the chair, the table. The movers didn't ask questions. Neither did I. Grace watched the last piece come in and looked around our living room like she was seeing a future. "This is ours?" "Yes," I said. She smiled like she believed it. Mom called the day they got back. I almost didn't answer. Not because I was scared, because I wasn't sure I had the energy to hear my mother pretend she was the victim of her own decisions. "Jessica!" she barked the second I picked up. "What did you do to our living room?" "Hi to you too," I said. "The couch is gone," she snapped. "The chair, the table. Are you out of your mind?" "No," I said. "I'm out of your house." "You stole our furniture," she said. "We could call the police." "Please do," I said. "I can text you the receipts while you're on hold." She made a sound like she'd swallowed a lemon. "You're unbelievable. And you removed your card from Hawaii too. We paid it ourselves, just so you know. We don't need your charity." "Perfect," I said. Adults paying for their own vacation. Love a growth moment. "Don't get smart with me," she started. Click. She hung up. I stared at my phone for a second because the sheer audacity almost deserves applause. That was just the appetizer, though. The loud part. The easy part. The part they hadn't mentioned, the part that actually mattered, was still sitting quietly in Bella's student account, waiting to be noticed. It didn't wait long. About an hour later, Mom called again. Same name on the screen, different voice. Not just angry this time. Worried angry. "Jessica," she said, and she skipped the warm-up. "What did you do to Bella's university account?" "What do you mean?" I asked. "Bella says her payment didn't go through," Mom snapped. "There's an email. A hold. She can't register for next term if this isn't fixed." I kept my voice steady. "My card isn't on the portal anymore." Mom went silent for half a beat, like her brain was rebooting. "You removed it?" "Yes." "You can't just punish your sister because you're upset with us," she said, clipped and righteous. "I'm not punishing her," I said. "I'm not paying for her." "She's your sister," Mom shot back, like that was a court order. "And Grace is my daughter," I said. "You left a move-out note where she could find it." "Don't change the subject," Mom snapped. "I'm not," I said. "This is the subject. You ended the deal. So the payments ended." Mom's voice rose. "Bella's loan was approved." "It was approved with me as cosigner," I said. "And before the next term, there's new paperwork for the next disbursement. Someone has to sign it." Mom's breath caught. "So sign it." "No," I said. A beat of silence. Then, "Jessica." "No," I repeated, calm and final. "Brooke is like family. Maybe Brooke can help." Mom sputtered. "That's not funny." "I didn't write the joke," I said. "You did." Click. I ended the call. Then Bella called, and Bella was not calm. "What did you do?" she demanded. "Did you sabotage my account? I got a message about the loan. It says there's paperwork. It says—" Her voice shook with anger. "What did you do?" I let her talk for a second. Let her burn herself out. Then I said, I didn't sabotage anything. Yes, you did, Bella spat. This is you being bitter. No, I said evenly. This is you learning how your own life works. Bella went silent for half a beat. Then, what does that mean? It means the school doesn't just sprinkle money on you like fairy dust, I said. There's paperwork, every term, and someone has to sign for it. Bella's voice sharpened. Mom said it was approved. It was, I said. For what already happened. What comes next needs a signature too. A beat. And you're not doing it, she said, like she'd just reached the edge of something. No, I said. I'm not. Bella's breathing went tight. You can't do that. I already did, I said. I'm not signing anything else. But what am I supposed to do? She demanded, and for a second it slipped. She didn't sound angry. She sounded scared. I kept my voice calm anyway. The thing you told me to do. Be an adult. Figure it out. Bella went quiet. And before you ask, I added, dry. No, this isn't sabotage. Sabotage would have involved effort. That's not fair, she shot back. I almost smiled. Interesting. You didn't mention fairness when you were calling me a leech. I didn't mean... Yes, you did, I said. And you were right about one thing. I needed to live independently. I paused. Let it land. So I am, I continued. Which means I'm not funding your life anymore. I'm funding mine. And Grace's. Her voice sharpened. You're ruining my life! No, I said. I'm refusing to run it. Jess? Goodbye, Bella. I hung up. A few days later, they showed up at my door. Mom, Dad, Bella. All three of them standing there like a team that had practiced being polite in the car. I didn't open the door. I spoke through it. What do you want? I asked. Mom's voice turned sweet. Too sweet. Jessica, honey, can we talk? No, but I didn't say that yet. I let her keep talking because sometimes people reveal everything when they think they're being persuasive. Dad cleared his throat. We just need you to listen. Bella's voice cut in, sharp. This isn't funny. I almost laughed again. Bella had never been told no in her life. Of course she thought boundaries were a joke. Mom said, We really need you to help your sister. There it was. Bella can't get the loan without your co-signature, Dad added quietly. And we can't co-sign. Mom rushed in. Our credit isn't... She stopped herself, then forced it out. We can't qualify, and we can't afford to cover it ourselves. Bella snapped. So just sign it. Mom did that same sugar voice again. We all love each other. We're family. We just wanted you to grow up. Bella added, without meaning to, I'm not 31 like you. Silence. I stood on the other side of the door, my hand on the lock, feeling something in me settle into a calm I hadn't had in years. No, I said. Mom's voice tightened. Jessica. No, I repeated. And you're not coming in. Bella's voice rose. You can't do this to me. I exhaled slowly. I'm not doing anything to you. I'm just not doing it for you anymore. Bella's voice cracked. I won't be able to study. You'll figure it out, I said. And yes, I meant it the same way they meant it when they left me with a move-out note. You're an adult too, Mom snapped. Don't be cruel. I almost laughed. Cruel, I said. You left a note where my 7-year-old could find it. Dad tried, quieter. Jess, please. I kept my voice steady. You don't get access to my child anymore. No contact. Not with me. Not with Grace. Bella made a choking sound. You're ruining everything. You ruined your own plan when you decided I was disposable. Mom's sweetness vanished. "You're being dramatic." I smiled to myself, because of course she said it. "No," I said. "I'm being done." And then I opened the door, just enough to make it clear I wasn't afraid of them, just uninterested, and I pointed down the hallway. "Leave." For a second, Bella looked like she might cry, like she genuinely could not process someone refusing to rescue her. Then Dad turned away first. Mom hissed something under her breath. Bella stared at the door like she was trying to force it open with entitlement alone. Then they left, and the hallway went quiet. Not empty quiet, peaceful quiet. I locked the door, and I walked back to where Grace was coloring at the table in our new living room, humming softly to herself like the world finally made sense again. About 2 months ago, my phone lit up with Mom again, and I almost didn't answer because I already knew this wasn't going to be an apology. But something in me said, take it. Hear what they want this time. Because after everything they did, there was still one last twist I didn't see coming. It wasn't about Grace. It wasn't about apologizing. It wasn't even about Bella. It was about the house. They needed my signature again to refinance or avoid a payment jump on the mortgage. I'd co-signed it 5 years ago, back when helping families still sounded like love instead of a warning label. Mom called it just a signature, like my name was a free stamp. Dad kept saying, it's nothing, like nothing ever becomes something until it's happening to them. They said if the payments jumped, they couldn't afford it. They said they might lose the house. And I won't lie, hearing that did something to me. Not guilt, not triumph, just this quiet, brutal irony. The same people who left a move-out note for a child to find were now asking me to save their home. I told them no. That was the last time I heard from them. And I'm not going to pretend I know exactly how it ends for them, whether they found someone else to hold the weight or whether the whole thing finally collapsed like it always should have. All I know is what happened next in my house. Grace slept through the night. No shaking hands, no fear, just peace. So what do you think? Did I go too far? Or not far enough? Let me know in the comments and subscribe for more. For my sister's big wedding, my family invited my 11-year-old son, but not my 9-year-old daughter. We've all decided she shouldn't come, they said. I just replied, noted, we won't be attending. Then I made one quiet change. 3 weeks later, their lives were falling apart. If you'd walked into my kitchen that week, you would have thought we were preparing for a small royal coronation. Not because we're royal. We're not. My family sells that illusion the way some people sell essential oils, aggressively and with a suspicious amount of confidence. But my daughter Ruby had turned Brooke's wedding into a project, a mission, a full-time job with unpaid overtime. There was a dress photo taped inside the cabinet door at Ruby eye level. There were index cards on the counter with neat block letters. Smile. Say congratulations. Ask one question. Do not interrupt. A little checklist with boxes she'd been crossing off for weeks. And there was Ruby, in her favorite spot at the table, shoulders tense with determination, asking me for the 97th time, Mom, what do I do if someone asks me what I want to be when I grow up? I glanced up from the sink. You tell them the truth. Ruby frowned. The truth can be wrong. That depends on the person, I said. Owen, my 11-year-old, walked by and snagged a grape from the bowl. Tell them you want to be a dragon. Ruby didn't even look at him. That is not an acceptable career. It's a hobby, Owen said, and I watched him drift closer to Ruby like a little guard dog. He wasn't loud about it. He never was. He just hovered, ready to block a comment, hand her a fidget, change the subject, like he'd been training for this in secret. Ruby tapped her pencil, then looked at me. Mom? What are the rules again? I felt that familiar squeeze in my chest. The part of me that wanted to wrap her in bubble wrap and move us to a cabin in the woods where the only social rules were, don't eat the poisonous mushrooms. I dried my hands. You say hello. You keep your hands to yourself. You don't touch the cake until they cut it. Ruby nodded seriously, as if I'd just explained a complicated legal contract. The phone rang, and I knew, before I even saw the screen, that this wasn't going to be about napkins. It was my sister, Brooke. Her voice was bright in that way people sound when they're already rehearsing what they're about to say. "Hey," she chirped. "Quick question." There are two kinds of quick questions. The harmless ones, like, "What time are you coming?" and the ones that destroy something. I put the phone to my ear and turned slightly, my back angled toward Ruby, like my body could block words. "Yeah?" I said. Brooke didn't waste time. "So we finalized the list." I pictured my parents hovering over a spreadsheet like they were planning an invasion. "And we're keeping it tight," Brooke continued, "just to keep things smooth." There it was. Smooth. The word my family uses when they mean controlled. Then she said it. "Owen can come, obviously, but we've all decided Ruby shouldn't." For a second, I didn't understand the sentence, like my brain refused to process it. Then heat rushed up my neck. "What do you mean she shouldn't?" Brooke sighed like I was being dramatic for reacting to something objectively awful. "Aaron, please don't do this." I stared at the cabinet where Ruby's dress photo was taped. The edges were curling from being opened and closed 100 times. "Don't do what?" I asked. My voice sounded too calm, like it belonged to someone else. "It's just—" Brooke lowered her voice, like the walls had ears. "It's a big wedding. There are a lot of important people. Nathan's family. You know." I did know. Everyone knew. My parents had been talking about Nathan's father, Richard, like he was a celebrity and a religion at the same time. His company was the bigger one, the one my parents' small business had partnered with recently. The partnership had already made their lives swell in size, like someone pumped air into them. New friends, new opportunities, new obsession with how it looks. And now my 9-year-old daughter was apparently a threat to it. I took a breath. Ruby has been preparing for this for months. Brooke made a small noise, impatient. "Okay, no, you don't understand," I said, and I could hear the desperation in my own voice. I hated it. I hated needing them to have a conscience. "She's been practicing what to say. She made cards. She asks me rules every day because she wants to do it right. She wants to be included." Brooke's tone hardened. "Aaron, she's not a baby," I pressed. "She's 9. She can sit with me. I'll take her outside if she needs a break. I will handle it. You're talking like she's—" "Like she's what?" Brooke snapped. I swallowed. "Like she's embarrassing." Silence. Then Brooke exhaled, sharp and annoyed, like I'd said the quiet part out loud. "We can't risk anything," she said. "Not at this wedding. Not with his family there. People don't understand. You know how it can be." My fingers curled around the phone. "You're not worried about her being overwhelmed. You're worried about optics." "That's not fair," Brooke said immediately, which is what people say when it's completely fair. "You're my sister," I said. "Ruby is your niece." "And this is my wedding," Brooke shot back. "We all discussed it. It's better this way. End of discussion." That line hit like a door slamming. I opened my mouth and nothing came out. Because what do you say to someone who just told you, calmly, that your child is a liability? I stood there, phone pressed to my ear, staring at Ruby's cards on the counter, her neat handwriting, her effort. And then, behind me, I felt it. That shift in the air, the quiet weight of being watched. I turned. Ruby was standing in the doorway, clutching one of her index cards so tightly the paper bent. She had that expression she got when she was trying to keep her face neutral. The one that always made my throat burn because it looked like a child doing CPR on her own feelings. I didn't know how much she'd heard, but I knew she'd heard enough. Brooke was still talking. "Erin, are you there?" I couldn't take my eyes off Ruby. Ruby didn't ask a question. She didn't offer a solution. She didn't say, "I can be good. I can be quiet. I can try harder." She just swallowed once, like she was forcing something down, and her voice came out too small. "Okay," she said. That was it. No bargaining, no panic. Just acceptance, like she'd already learned that effort doesn't always earn you entry. I ended the call without saying goodbye. My hands shook, not wildly, just enough to make me furious. Ruby's eyes flicked to the dress photo inside the cabinet, then away. She walked to the counter, picked up her cards, and stacked them neatly, as if tidiness could make it hurt less. I turned back to my phone. There was a family chat. Of course there was. My family loves group chats. It gives them an audience. I didn't call. I didn't talk it out. I didn't write a paragraph explaining my daughter's humanity. I just typed, "Noted. We won't be attending," and hit send. For a second, nothing happened. Then my phone lit up like a slot machine. Mom. "Erin, don't do this." Dad. "This is one day." Brooke. "You're making it into something it isn't." Someone else. "Think about what you're teaching your kids." I didn't respond. Ruby quietly slid her cards into a drawer and closed it, very carefully, like the sound might shatter her. I watched her do it, and something in me went cold and clean. At the time, I didn't know it yet. None of us did. But that single decision, to keep Ruby out, would change everything. 3 weeks later, their lives were falling apart. I've been the oldest for as long as I can remember, not in the cute "I helped pack lunches" way, in the "if something breaks, it's my job to fix it" way. When my parents were stressed, I became small and easy. When my sister wanted something, I learned how to give without being asked. It wasn't dramatic. It was just the shape of our family. Mom and Dad were always busy. Brooke was always loud. And I was always the one smoothing the edges. Even when I moved out, I didn't stop being the fixer. I hosted holidays, I brought dishes, I checked in, I apologized for other people's behavior like it was a hobby. Then I had Owen, and my family went insane in the way families do when a baby is easy to celebrate. Pictures, gifts. Our little man. Mom cried at the hospital. Dad started calling himself Pop, like we were in a commercial. It was loud love, the kind that doesn't ask questions. Then Ruby came along, and Ruby was never bad. She was never difficult for the sake of it. She was just Ruby. When she was around 3 or 4, I started noticing small differences I couldn't name yet. She didn't like certain fabrics. Tags were a war crime. Loud birthday parties made her go stiff and silent, then explode later, like her body couldn't hold the noise inside. She lined things up. She repeated phrases. She watched people like she was studying them for a test she didn't know the subject of. At first, everyone said the same things. "She's sensitive. She'll grow out of it. You're overthinking." Then there was a day at a crowded indoor play place when Ruby clapped her hands over her ears and slid under a table shaking. I was crouched beside her whispering, "Breathe with me," while other parents stared like my child was misbehaving. And Mom said, out loud, "Erin, she's being dramatic." That was one of the first times I felt that sharp little snap inside me. The moment I realized my family didn't understand the difference between overwhelmed and disobedient. It took time to get answers, years of collecting little puzzle pieces, teachers hinting, pediatricians waving it off. Me walking out of appointments with pamphlets about strong-willed children, like that explained why my daughter cried when someone moved her cup. Then, a few years ago, a specialist finally said the word: autistic. The diagnosis was a weird mix of grief and relief. Grief because the world is not kind to kids who don't blend in. Relief because I wasn't imagining it, and now I could actually help her instead of guessing in the dark. I made a promise to myself that day, sitting in my car with my hands on the steering wheel, trying not to cry. Ruby would never be treated like a problem to hide. Not by strangers, and definitely not by my own family. I thought that promise would be easy, because who looks at a child and decides she's too inconvenient to love? Turns out, plenty of people. Especially the ones who love you conditionally. The first holiday after Ruby's diagnosis, she said something honest in the way she always did. Literal. Direct. Not rude, just unfiltered truth. An aunt laughed too loudly. Someone said, "Oh wow, she's such a little weirdo," like it was cute. Then Mom leaned into my ear and whispered, "You have to stop her from doing that." Not, "Is she okay?" Not, "How can we help?" Just, make her more palatable. I tried the polite route. For years, I explained autism in simple terms. I offered strategies. I asked for patience. I reminded them she wasn't being difficult. She was processing differently. They nodded. They smiled. They did nothing different. Ruby, meanwhile, started doing what a lot of kids like her do. Masking. She watched people closely. She copied tone. She practiced phrases under her breath like homework. She learned when to laugh even if the joke didn't make sense. She learned how long to make eye contact so people wouldn't say she was rude. She came home from school drained, holding herself together all day like she was carrying a heavy box with no handles. Then she'd collapse into silence on the couch, cheeks pale, eyes unfocused. Owen understood before anyone else did. At family gatherings, he'd drift toward Ruby like gravity. He'd hand her something to fidget with. He'd steer her away from loud kids. He'd jump in with a joke if an adult started staring. He never made it dramatic. He just protected her. My parents, on the other hand, started having important events. A dinner, a work thing, a party where they wanted to impress someone. At one of those gatherings, Ruby said something a little too literal to someone in a fancy suit. I watched the person blink, smile too tightly, and then turn away. Later, Mom pulled me aside and said, "This is exactly what I mean." "Exactly what?" I asked. Mom's eyes flicked toward the room like it was a stage. "We can't have that." That was when she used the word for the first time. Embarrassing. Ruby didn't hear that specific word that night, but she didn't need to. She felt the shift. She always did. She asked me in the car on the way home, very quietly, "Am I hard to bring places?" I nearly swerved off the road. I told her no. I told her she was not too much. I told her the world was too small and we were going to find bigger spaces. But the question stayed with me, because she didn't ask it like a dramatic child. She asked it like someone gathering data. Then Brooke got engaged. And suddenly the family's obsession with important people hit a new level. Brooke started saying Nathan's family like a title. Mom started talking about Richard, Nathan's dad, like he was a prize. Dad was suddenly wearing nicer clothes. Everyone was acting like this wedding was the doorway to a life they'd always deserved. And the thing is, it kind of was. My parents had always run a small business. Nothing glamorous. It paid the bills. It kept them proud. But once Brooke started dating Nathan, everything changed. His father ran the bigger company they partnered with, and my parents' world expanded fast. New contacts, bigger numbers, a taste of money they'd never had. The way they talked, you could almost hear the greed shining through the polite words. Now they were obsessed with keeping everything perfect, because this wedding wasn't just family. It was the future they thought they were finally entitled to. Ruby heard wedding and latched onto it like it was a lighthouse. Her first big formal event. A place with rules, clear expectations, a chance to be included properly. She asked me questions every day, not to be annoying, but because she wanted to do it right. And the hardest part was realizing she wasn't excited like a kid. She was excited like someone trying to earn a seat at a table she'd been hovering outside of her whole life. 3 weeks later, the wedding was over. We didn't go. That part didn't kill anyone. Shocking, I know. My phone still had the old messages sitting there, unread, like a pile of garbage someone expected me to sort. Life at home settled into a quieter rhythm. Owen went back to school like normal. Ruby stopped asking about weddings entirely, like the topic had been quietly buried in the backyard. Easter came next. I've always hosted. It's just what I do. The fixer, remember? But this year, I did something different. I sent the Easter message to the usual family circle. Aunts, cousins, people who show up with potato salad and opinions. I did not include Mom, Dad, or Brooke. No announcement, no warning, no dramatic, after everything you've done. Just a message with a time and a place, like always. Owen watched me hit send and didn't say anything. He just nodded once, like he understood the assignment. Ruby sat at the table, drawing quietly, pretending not to listen. But her shoulders were less tense than usual, like the idea of not performing was a relief. The group chat responded normally at first. Do you need deviled eggs? I can bring dessert. What time should we come? Then the interruption came. Mom. Wait. Are we not invited? The tone was sharp and staged, like she'd stepped onto a stage and adjusted her microphone. Brooke followed immediately. So first you don't attend my wedding, and now you're cutting us out of Easter? What is wrong with you? Dad jumped in too, because of course he did. This is cruel, Erin. You're punishing everyone. They weren't asking quietly. They weren't texting privately. They wanted witnesses. They wanted the whole family to see me being difficult, because that's how they win. They make you feel shame under fluorescent lighting. I stared at the screen, that old reflex stirring in me, the one that wants to smooth it over, soften the edges, fix it. Then Ruby looked up from her drawing. She wasn't crying. She wasn't yelling. She was just watching my face like she was waiting to learn what truth costs. And something in me went still. I typed one message. Just one. No speech, no diagnosis lesson, no begging for empathy. I didn't attend Brooke's wedding because you excluded Ruby for being autistic and said you couldn't risk embarrassment in front of Nathan's family. So no, you're not invited to Easter. We're done. I hit send. The chat went weirdly quiet. No jokes, no emojis, no immediate backlash. Just that awful pause where you can feel people reading. Then someone typed, "Is that true?" I didn't answer. Because if I answered that in the group chat, it would turn into a debate. And I wasn't putting my 9-year-old's dignity up for family voting like it was a casserole contest. A few minutes passed. Then my phone rang. Unknown number at first. Then it stopped. Then it rang again. This time it came through with a name. Nathan. I stared at it for a beat, thumb hovering, brain doing that quick inventory of worst-case scenarios. Then I picked up. Hi, I said. There was a pause on the other end. Not dramatic, not angry, just careful. Like he was walking across glass. Erin, he said quietly. I'm sorry to call. I saw what you wrote. Okay. Another pause. I could hear breathing, like he was trying to decide how to ask without sounding like the villain. Is it true? He asked. Did they really tell you Ruby couldn't come because they didn't want to risk embarrassment? My throat tightened. I kept my voice level anyway. Yes, I said. That's what they said. And Ruby, he added, softer. She's 9. Yes. He didn't say, that's insane, even though I could tell he wanted to. He didn't try to smooth it over. He didn't defend Brooke. He just went quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I didn't know. I know, I replied. Another pause. Thank you for telling me the truth, he said finally. Then he hung up. The next morning, the pounding started. Not a polite knock. Not a, hey, can we talk? Pounding. Owen appeared in the hallway instantly, like he'd been waiting for it. Ruby was behind him, quiet and pale, gripping the edge of her shirt. I opened the door and there was Brooke. Her eyes were red, but not with sadness, with rage. Her hair was shoved back like she'd done it in a hurry. Her whole body looked wired, vibrating. She didn't say hello. She didn't look at Ruby. She launched straight at me like a missile. What did you tell him? She hissed. Who? I asked. Nathan, what did you tell my husband? Nothing. I kept my voice calm. He called me. I just told him the truth. Brooke's laugh was sharp and ugly. Of course he did, and of course you couldn't wait. I didn't call him, I said. He asked if it was true. I said yes. Brooke stepped closer. He left. I didn't move. Left where? Brooke's face twisted. I don't know. Somewhere. He said he needed space. He said he needed to think. Her voice cracked on the last word like it physically offended her. He wouldn't even sleep at home. Owen's jaw clenched. Ruby went very still. Brooke noticed them then, really noticed them. And instead of lowering her voice, she got louder. Good, she snapped, eyes flicking to Ruby like Ruby was an object on a counter. They should hear this. They should see what you've done. I felt something cold slide into place inside me. Brooke, leave. She jabbed a finger toward my chest. You humiliated me in front of everyone. You made me look like a monster. You excluded your niece, I said, voice flat. Brooke shook her head fast, like she could shake reality loose. We were protecting the wedding. No, I said. You were protecting your image. Brooke surged forward into my space, and for a second I thought she was going to shove past me into my house. Her hand grabbed my arm hard, nails digging in. I yanked back, and Owen stepped forward without thinking. Don't touch my mom, he said. Brooke's eyes flashed. Stay out of it. Ruby made a small sound, barely a sound at all, and Brooke rounded on her like that sound was an insult. This is exactly why, she spat, and then caught herself too late. I saw Ruby's face change, that familiar shutdown, that awful retreat, and something in me snapped. Not loudly, not dramatically, just clean. Get out, I said. Brooke's chest heaved. Her voice rose, wild and shaking, filling my doorway while my kids watched. You did this to me! And that was the moment I understood this wasn't just a family fight anymore. It was a safety moment, and I wasn't going to lose it. Easter still happened at my house. Not because I was trying to prove a point, because I refused to let Brooke's tantrums steal another day from my kids. I kept the curtains open. I kept the door locked. I let Owen help hide eggs in the yard. I let Ruby decide where she wanted to sit, and nobody looked at her like she was a problem to manage. It was quieter than it had ever been. No walking on eggshells. No translating passive-aggressive comments. No, just ignore it whispered in the kitchen. For one day, it felt like peace might actually hold. And I let myself believe, briefly, that the blow-up was the end of it. Then, a few days later, there was a knock at my door. Not pounding, knocking, soft, polite. When I opened it, both my parents were standing there with the kind of smiles people wear when they're trying to sell you something. Mom held a container like it was a peace offering. Dad's hands were in his pockets, shoulders lifted like he was trying to look harmless. "Hi, Aaron," Mom said, voice syrupy. "Can we talk?" I didn't step aside. "About what?" Mom's smile twitched. "We hate how things have been." Dad nodded quickly. "This has gotten out of hand." Mom continued. "We want to make it right. We didn't realize how it sounded." The words were sweet, but the urgency underneath them was sharp enough to cut. I waited. Mom's eyes flicked past me, toward the living room, like she was checking if Ruby was visible. "There's concern," she said carefully. "About the partnership." There it was. The real wound. Dad cleared his throat. "They're reconsidering some things." Mom rushed in. "Nothing is final yet. It's just tense. Nathan has been distant. It's all very complicated. But we think there's a way to fix it." I crossed my arms. "Let me guess. That way involves me doing emotional labor for free." Mom laughed lightly, like I'd made a joke and not a statement of fact. "We're hosting a family dinner," she said. "Everyone will be there. Brooke and Nathan's parents, Richard and Victoria." Dad added, "They want to talk. Clear the air." Mom's smile widened. "We want you there. And Owen. And Ruby." My stomach tightened. "Ruby?" Mom nodded quickly, like she was very proud of herself. "Yes, Ruby will be included. We'll do whatever adjustments she needs. Quiet space, safe foods, breaks. Whatever makes her comfortable." It sounded rehearsed, like they'd written it down. Dad stepped forward slightly. "This is a chance, Aaron, for healing." For a second, I almost laughed. They hadn't come to apologize. They'd come because their shiny new future was wobbling and they needed me to hold it steady. Mom leaned in, lowering her voice like she was sharing something intimate. "Please, just come. If they see you're willing, if Ruby is there, it will show we're a family, that we can handle this." I stared at them, and I could feel the old reflex in my bones. The fixer, the smoother, the one who makes everyone comfortable. Then I thought about Ruby's face in the kitchen, the way she'd said okay, like she'd been training for rejection her whole life. I didn't say yes at the door. I said, "I'll think about it." Mom's relief was immediate. Too quick. Like she'd been sure I'd fold. After they left, I sat at my table with Owen and Ruby. Owen didn't look thrilled. "It's a trap," he said bluntly. Ruby stared at her hands. "If we go, will they want me there?" That question hurt more than any screaming. "They said you can come," I answered carefully. Ruby's eyes lifted, hopeful in that careful way that always made me want to cry. Not excited, not joyful. Hopeful like she was stepping onto thin ice. I didn't agree because I trusted my parents. I agreed because Ruby deserved one moment where family didn't mean enduring. So we went. Mom and Dad's house looked like it had been staged for a magazine spread called People Who Are Definitely Not Panicking. Too clean, too bright, too many smiles. Brooke was there, wearing her new wife glow like armor. Nathan stood off to the side, quiet and tight in the jaw. Richard and Victoria sat at the table like they were watching a documentary. Polite. Still. Taking notes without a notebook. Mom made a big show of accommodations. Quiet room, soft lighting. "Ruby's safe foods." She said it loudly, like she wanted applause for basic decency. Ruby nodded and kept her eyes on her plate. Dinner started fine. Almost fine. The kind of fine that makes you think, maybe this was just a nightmare. Then Mom stood up with her glass. Of course she did. "I'm just so glad we're all together," she said, voice syrupy. "And I want to clear something up. People don't understand autism. It can be difficult. Sometimes Ruby says things and people can be offended, and we just didn't want that to happen at the wedding. But we love her in our own way. This doesn't mean we don't love a child." Ruby's shoulders pulled inward. Her gaze dropped like she was trying to make herself smaller in real time. And my parents looked pleased with themselves, like they'd just delivered a TED Talk called How to Exclude Someone Kindly. Richard didn't raise his voice. He didn't even change his expression much. He just leaned forward slightly and asked one question, calm as a knife. "Do you think Ruby is lesser because she's autistic?" The room froze. Mom's smile stayed on her face for half a second too long, then cracked. Dad stared at his plate like the answer might be printed on it. Brooke's eyes flicked to Nathan, desperate. And Ruby stayed looking down. Mom gave a thin laugh. "No, of course not. It's just, people don't understand. We were trying to make it easier." Richard nodded once, like he'd heard enough. Then he said quietly, "I'm autistic." Dead silence. Brooke went rigid. Dad blinked like his brain stalled. Mom's mouth opened and didn't find a sound. Richard didn't linger on it, no dramatic build-up, just fact. "My whole life," he continued, "people looked at me the way you just looked at her, like I was a risk, like I needed managing. That's why I stopped telling people. I learned to mask. I learned to blend. And I got very good at it." Ruby's head lifted, slowly, like she couldn't help it, because the person everyone in that room treated like royalty had just said the word autistic like it wasn't shameful at all. Richard turned to Ruby. His voice softened, but it didn't turn sugary. "Ruby," he said, "you are not lesser. You're not broken. You don't have to shrink to make people comfortable. You can do anything you want. Anything. And when people try to make you smaller, that tells you something about them, not about you." Ruby stared at him, wide-eyed. Then her chin lifted a fraction more, like she was testing the shape of confidence. Richard leaned back, looked at my parents, and his tone went flat again. "And as for the partnership," he said, "it's not going to work." Mom's face drained. "Please." Richard stood. Victoria stood with him. Nathan stood too, not looking at Brooke. Richard didn't argue. He didn't negotiate. He didn't give them the dignity of a debate. He just left. Nathan followed. The front door closed, and the silence that remained felt heavier than any shouting. My parents sat there, stunned, like they'd just watched their future walk out on its own legs. Ruby didn't look down anymore. I reached for her hand. Owen was already at her side, and I did what I should have done a long time ago. I stood up, took my kids, and walked out without saying a word. 6 months later. Our house is quiet in the best way. No dread, no group chat drama, no family meeting ambushes disguised as concern. Owen laughs like he's not on duty anymore. Ruby doesn't flinch when the doorbell rings. She's got friends now. Real ones. The kind who don't treat her like a problem to solve. She's still Ruby, still rule-loving, still blunt sometimes, but she says what she thinks without staring at my face afterward like she's waiting to be punished for existing. And me? I'm still no contact. The easiest boundary I've ever kept once I stopped confusing guilt with love. The fallout came in pieces, through other people, like gossip delivered with a side of shock. Brooke's marriage didn't survive the "we excluded your niece because she might embarrass us" conversation. Nathan moved out, then made it official. Divorced. Richard didn't just pause the partnership. He ended it. Clean. Final. The kind of cut you don't stitch back together. My parents tried to scramble. They begged. They blamed me. They tried to spin it as a misunderstanding. But once the bigger company pulled out, everyone else suddenly remembered they had concerns too. Contracts dried up, accounts closed, calls stopped getting returned. The small business they were so proud of, gone. The house they loved showing off, sold. Last I heard, they were renting a place across town and telling anyone who would listen that I destroyed the family. Which is funny, because I didn't destroy anything. I just stopped covering it up. Sometimes I think about that day in my kitchen, Ruby holding her little cards, saying okay, like she'd already decided she wasn't worth the effort. Then I think about her now, sitting on the couch with friends texting her. And I remember what peace feels like when you stop begging to be treated like family. So what do you think? Did I go too far or not far enough? Let me know in the comments and subscribe for more.
Hi, I'm really excited to share this new story for you. In this one, I explore a really complicated family dynamics and a difficult choice that a character has to make. Let's listen.
My dad barked at my 7-year-old stepdaughter. No one cares what you think. My mom added sweetly, only real grandchildren get to vote. She went silent. Then I stood up and said, I need to make an announcement. 5 minutes later, the whole room was in shock. The second my father's voice cracked across the living room, every other sound in my parents' house seemed to fall through the floor. My 7-year-old stepdaughter, Clara, still had her hand half raised, like she thought maybe this was a misunderstanding somebody would fix if she just waited long enough. Then my mother leaned in with that soft, sugary tone she uses when she wants to make something ugly sound reasonable, and Clara's face changed. The other kids stopped rustling their little voting slips. My sister Mallory froze with a paper plate in her hand. My brother Graham actually set his soda down. I looked at my husband Evan, Clara's father, and saw the same shock on his face that I felt in my throat. But he didn't move, so I did. I pushed my chair back, stood up, and said, I need to make an announcement. Dad made a small, irritated noise like I was interrupting his show. I slipped my hand into my tote, closed my fingers around the folder I'd been carrying all day, and watched the room shift from casual to uneasy in about 2 seconds. Half an hour earlier, everybody had been smiling. Now nobody wanted to guess what was in my hand. Earlier that afternoon, my parents' house had looked like one of their favorite productions. Folding chairs dragged in from the garage, a big bowl of pretzels on the coffee table, kids orbiting the living room and back deck like noisy little planets. My mother loves these gatherings because she gets to act like she's the keeper of family traditions. She was already talking about the next outing before half the burgers from this one were off the grill. We need to pick something for the kids next month, she said, tapping a pen against a notepad. Something special. My sister Mallory suggested the trampoline park. My brother Graham's wife mentioned the science museum because of the dinosaur exhibit. Dad threw in a small amusement park about 40 minutes away, and suddenly every child in the room had a platform and a position. The older boys started debating height requirements like lawyers. 2 of the girls wanted the museum because they'd seen a giant fossil online. Clara was on the rug between me and Evan, knees tucked under her, listening with that bright look she gets when she thinks she's about to be included in something fun. At that point, I still let myself believe the afternoon might stay ordinary. It took less than a minute for the kids to split into camps and defend their picks with the absolute confidence only children bring to trivial decisions. Mallory's son declared the trampoline park basically the Olympics. Graham's daughter insisted the museum had a fossil bigger than Dad's truck. Clara lit up at the words amusement park and scooted forward onto both knees like she'd been waiting all day to have something to champion. They have the little coaster, she said, talking right over 2 cousins who were also talking. And the teacups, and the water boats. She was animated, loud, a little bossy, and completely normal for a 7-year-old in a room full of excited cousins. One of the boys interrupted her. She interrupted him back. Clara sliced the air with both hands while she explained why the museum was mostly just looking and the amusement park was actual fun. I remember noticing how easy she looked in that moment. 3 years earlier, she had hovered at the edges of groups. She assumed she belonged there, exactly like the others. And then I saw my father's face and knew the afternoon had shifted on me. My father wasn't bothered by noise in general. He was only bothered by Clara's. That was what made it impossible to excuse. Graham's youngest kept tugging on Dad's sleeve and chanting "Trampoline Park" directly into his ear. Mallory's daughter whined so dramatically my mother laughed. But every time Clara jumped in, his mouth flattened into that tight line I had learned to dread. Once, when she leaned toward the coffee table to make another point, he said, "Let other people talk," even though 3 children were already talking over each other. A minute later, she laughed too loudly at one of her own jokes, and he turned his head with open irritation. It wasn't subtle, and it wasn't new. My parents had spent the last 3 years enforcing the same silent rule every chance they got. Clara could visit. Clara could smile for pictures if someone remembered. Clara could sit at the table. But Clara was not supposed to forget that she was standing near the family, not inside it. I put my hand lightly on her shoulder when she moved closer to the adults. She didn't notice. Dad did. His eyes flicked from her to me, and I knew exactly what that meant. My mother, who loves turning simple things into ceremonies when the audience suits her, decided the argument needed structure. "All right," she said, lifting her notepad. "We're going to vote." The room cheered like she'd announced a game show. She tore little squares from the pad, passed them out one by one, and told the kids to write or draw their choice. Dad found crayons in the junk drawer and tossed them onto the rug. Suddenly, the whole debate got even louder. Kids were comparing handwriting, asking how to spell museum, and peeking at each other's papers. Clara grinned and reached her hand out with the rest of them. Mom handed a slip to Mallory's youngest, then Graham's daughter, then 2 more cousins, then the oldest boy who didn't even want one. Clara kept her hand up, patient at first. When Mom turned away, Clara looked at me and gave the little half-laugh kids give when adults forget them. She leaned forward and said, "I need one too." My mother's fingers paused on the last scrap of paper. She looked straight at Clara's hand, then folded that scrap in half and laid it beside Dad instead. That was when I stopped telling myself it might be accidental. Clara still didn't understand what was happening. She was excited, not cautious, and excitement makes children persistent. "I want the rides," she said, bouncing once on her knees as the cousins started scribbling. "And the bumper cars." Dad kept counting papers like he hadn't heard her. Clara leaned closer, trying again, because every other child in the room had been encouraged to do exactly that for the last 10 minutes. "Can I just say mine? Mine is the amusement park." Dad's head snapped up so fast the room seemed to flinch with him. "No one cares what you think," he said, loud enough that even the kids on the back deck turned and looked in. Clara froze. Before I could speak, my mother stepped in with that terrible, calm voice she uses when she wants cruelty to sound like manners. "Honey," she said to Clara, "only real grandchildren get to vote." She even smiled a little, as if she were explaining where the cups were kept. Every child in that room heard the sentence. Mallory looked at me across the coffee table with disbelief all over her face. Graham muttered, "Mom," under his breath. Clara's mouth opened, then shut. The room went quiet the way rooms do when something ugly has finally been said out loud. The worst part wasn't the sentence itself. It was the way it landed in Clara's face. She went still all at once, like somebody had turned a key inside her and shut off the bright, noisy child who had been arguing about bumper cars 10 seconds earlier. She tucked her hands into her lap and fixed on one loose carpet thread, as if that was safer than looking at anyone. I turned to my husband, Evan, Clara's father, because some part of me still expected him to step between his daughter and the people who had just ranked her in public. He looked wrecked. He also looked frozen. Evan has spent years trying not to turn every visit with my parents into a war, and in that second the old instinct won before his voice did. So I stood up. My chair legs scraped against the hardwood, and every adult in the room looked at me. "I need to make an announcement," I said. Dad gave me an irritated, "Alyssa, sit down." I reached into my tote anyway, wrapped my fingers around the folder I'd carried in from the car, and pulled it halfway out. That was the moment the room stopped treating me like the problem and started wondering what I knew. Three years earlier, I met Evan because I taught a Saturday creative movement class for little kids at a rec center with mirrored walls and a floor that always smelled faintly like lemon cleaner. Most of the children came in already bouncing. Clara didn't. She was 4 then, small for her age, with a pink leotard that kept slipping off one shoulder and a face so solemn it made the other children look even louder by comparison. During our first class together, the kids were supposed to pretend they were butterflies crossing the room. Clara stood near the wall and watched everybody else flap. Her father, Evan, hovered by the door with the tired, apologetic posture of someone waiting for a problem before it even happened. After class, he bent to help her with her shoes, and I heard another parent ask where Clara's mom was. He answered softly, "She died in March." It wasn't dramatic. It was worse than dramatic because it sounded rehearsed. The next week, Clara came back and still didn't join the circle until I handed her one of the silk scarves we used for movement games and asked if she wanted to help me lead. She took the scarf first, then my hand. That was the first opening. Evan and I did not rush anything. For months, our relationship lived in the edges of Saturday mornings. A few extra minutes after class, conversations in the parking lot, Clara showing me a sticker on her shirt while he folded her sweater and tried to remember what normal conversations sounded like. She bonded with me first because children tell the truth with their feet, and Clara kept choosing to stand next to mine. She asked if I would hold her water bottle while she spun. She saved me half a packet of crackers one morning because teachers need snacks too. Eventually, Evan and I started meeting for coffee after class, but only when Clara was with his sister or asleep during a nap window. He never acted like I was there to fix his life, and I never treated Clara like a bridge to him. Over time, our routines got real. I knew which stuffed rabbit belonged in the car for long rides. I knew she hated the seam in one pair of socks and loved bedtime stories read slowly. She still remembered her mother. We kept that true. But by the time Evan and I admitted we were in love, Clara had already started running to the door when I came over saying, "Alyssa's here." Clara built the bond before we named the family. My parents reacted badly the minute they understood Evan was not a phase. I told them over Sunday roast at their kitchen table, thinking adult news deserved an adult conversation. My mother put her fork down first. "A widower with a child?" she said, like she'd discovered I was considering a merger, not a marriage. Dad didn't bother softening anything. "So, you're planning to spend your best years raising someone else's kid?" he asked. I said her name was Clara, and that she was 4, funny, cautious, and obsessed with songs about frogs. Mom waved the details away. Men like that don't really move on, she said. They compare, and children that age get attached to whoever is convenient. Dad added, "You don't need to sign up for baggage when you can just start clean." I remember staring at the potatoes because if I looked directly at either of them, I was going to end the night early. I told them Clara was not baggage. I told them Evan wasn't shopping for a replacement woman. I told them this was serious. Mom sighed and said, "We'll see how permanent it is." That sentence sat in the room like a stain. It was the first time I heard my own parents talk about a little girl as if she were temporary inventory. I married Evan anyway, and I did it because what we had was solid, not because I thought marriage would force my parents to become better people. Still, I hoped my larger family might do what large families sometimes do and absorb us by sheer repetition. At our backyard wedding, my sister Mallory knelt in the grass to fix Clara's flower crown, while my brother Graham taught her how to toss petals higher. The cousins pulled her into the sprinkler that same summer without a second thought. For a while, that helped me pretend the problem was smaller than it was. Then came the little moments my parents made sure I noticed. My mother ordered matching holiday pajamas for all the grandkids, and somehow Clara's size was missing. Dad lined the children up for a photo at Thanksgiving and said, "Let the real grandkids up front," as if he were sorting chairs, not people. Mallory shot him a look so sharp he actually cleared his throat, but he didn't take the words back. I kept bringing Clara because the cousins loved her, and because I told myself exposure might wear my parents down. Instead, they got more practiced at drawing the same line in different ways. They had learned how to exclude her politely. Even with all of that, Evan and I kept showing up for my parents in ways that were concrete, useful, and frankly undeserved. My mother's hours had been cut at work, and my father's retirement money never stretched as far as his pride. So on the first of every month, we sent money from our joint account to help with groceries, utilities, and whatever surprise bill had landed that week. When a leak from their upstairs bathroom came through the downstairs ceiling, Evan spent a Saturday fixing it instead of at the park with Clara. He replaced 2 porch steps, fixed a garbage disposal, and once drove over after work just to tarp a section of roof before a storm. My parents accepted every bit of it with amazing ease. Dad would clap Evan on the back and say, "Appreciate the help," in the same tone he'd use with a neighbor lending a ladder. Mom texted me things like, "Can you do the transfer a little early this month?" without ever once saying Clara's name in the same message as a holiday invite. We were a household, but my parents had no trouble taking support from the family they still refused to fully recognize. By the time Clara turned 7, the truth of our family no longer needed anyone's permission, and that was exactly why we had started the adoption process. Because Clara's mother had died when Clara was little and Evan had sole parental rights, the legal part was mostly paperwork, waiting, and careful steps, not a fight. Still, it mattered. It meant the world matching what daily life had already been for years. A week before the gathering, Clara sat at our kitchen island drawing hearts on scrap paper while I filled out a packet from our attorney. She looked up and asked, "When it's done, will it all say the same thing everywhere?" I told her yes. She said, "Good," and went back to coloring like we were discussing lunch. That morning, before we went to my parents' house, Evan and I had stopped at the bank to notarize 2 more signatures. The folder was still in my tote beside my wallet, 2 pens, and Clara's hair ties. We were supposed to mail copies on Monday, and I hadn't taken it back out after the bank. On the drive there, Clara fell asleep in the back seat with one sneaker half off. So when my parents made their big mistake, the papers were still with me. When I pulled the folder the rest of the way out in my parents' living room, the papers made a dry snapping sound that somehow carried more than yelling would have. Dad folded his arms. Mom gave a little laugh like she still expected to smooth me down. I laid the packet flat on the coffee table between the pretzel bowl and the children's crayons. "These are Clara's adoption papers," I said. No one interrupted me then. "Evan and I are already in the process. Clara is not a guest in my life. She is becoming my daughter in every legal way, too." I didn't wave the documents around. The signature lines were visible. The notary stamp was visible. My sister Mallory quietly took the slips of paper away from the younger kids and steered them toward the kitchen. Graham stood beside the doorway like he was ready to stop anybody from doing something stupid. Dad looked from the papers to Evan and back to me as if one of us would admit this was a stunt. Evan was pale, but he moved to Clara's side and rested a hand on her shoulder. The room had spent years pretending our family was vague. I wanted them to see it in black ink. My father recovered first because anger is his favorite shelter. "Don't be ridiculous," he said. "Nobody said she couldn't come around." My mother jumped in right behind him. "Alyssa, you're blowing up the entire family over a misunderstanding." I looked straight at both of them. "No," I said. "You blew this up when you told my child, in front of every other child here, that she doesn't count." Dad opened his mouth, probably to argue biology, so I cut him off. "Listen carefully. If Clara is not accepted as family, then you do not get me either. You do not get access to my house, my time, my energy, or my silence." Mom did the offended blink she uses when consequences arrive faster than she planned. "She's Evan's daughter," she said. "You know what I mean." "She's mine," I said. It was the first clean, public time I had ever said it to them that way. Dad tried again. "So that's it? You're choosing her over your own parents?" I didn't raise my voice. "I will choose my daughter every single time." In that room, in front of everybody, I chose my daughter and let them hear it. After that, the silence was so complete I could hear one of the kids in the kitchen asking Mallory for more lemonade. Nobody came charging after me with arguments. Nobody apologized either. My parents had spent years depending on confusion to protect them, and plain language had taken that away. I bent down, took Clara's small hand in one of mine and the folder in the other, and told her, "We're going home." Evan moved then, finally and fully. He grabbed our family bag, Clara's cardigan from the back of a chair, and the half-finished plate she'd been too hurt to touch again. His face was tight with guilt, but he didn't hesitate. Mallory met my eyes and gave one short nod. Graham stepped forward and held the front door open before Dad could get there first. My father tried once. "If you walk out over this," he began. I didn't wait to hear the end of the sentence. Outside, the air smelled like cut grass and charcoal. Clara climbed into the back seat without asking questions. I got into the passenger seat. Evan shut Clara's door gently, then mine. The front door closed behind us with a solid thud, and that sound felt honest. We didn't go straight home. Clara had folded inward in that quiet, careful way she uses when she's trying not to need anything, and I knew our house would feel too silent if we walked into it cold. So Evan pulled into a little ice cream place on the edge of town with plastic picnic tables and a giant fiberglass cone out front. We sat in the car first because Clara wasn't ready to go inside. She stared at the menu board and asked the question I had been dreading since the living room. "Am I not a real grandchild?" Her voice was flat, not dramatic. I turned in my seat and answered before anyone could wrap it in adult wording. "You are my daughter," I said, "and you are part of this family. What they said was wrong. Evan leaned back against the headrest for a second before speaking. I should have said something sooner, he told her. I am sorry. Clara nodded once but kept looking at me, which told me where the wound had landed. Nobody gets to decide whether you belong, I said. Not grandparents. Not anybody. She was quiet for another beat, then asked if she could get chocolate with sprinkles. That was enough to get us out of the car. That night, after Clara was asleep with her stuffed rabbit tucked under one arm, Evan and I sat at the kitchen island with the light on and the house dark. There are moments when hurt can still be argued with if nobody does anything practical. I did not want that. So I opened our banking app, pulled up the recurring transfer that went to my parents on the 1st of every month, and turned my phone toward Evan. It covered groceries, part of the electric bill, and the endless, just until next month emergencies my mother texted me about. Are we really done? I asked, because I wanted the answer to belong to both of us. Evan looked at the screen, then at the repair estimate for materials he'd promised to buy for Dad's deck. Yes, he said. He entered the verification code when the bank sent it, and I hit cancel. Then I opened the family group chat with everyone in it and typed one factual message. After what was said to Clara today, we will not attend events involving Mom and Dad unless Clara is treated the same as every other child. We are also stepping back from providing financial help. No speech, no insults, just terms. For the first time, the boundary existed somewhere they couldn't talk over. My parents treated the group message like a tantrum they could outwait, but my siblings did something my parents had not expected. They called me separately and spoke plainly. Mallory rang first after she got her kids to bed. My kids heard everything, she said. One of them asked why Clara didn't get paper if she's family. I didn't have a good answer, because there isn't one. She sounded tired of excusing them. An hour later, Graham called from his garage so his son wouldn't overhear. Dad's been doing this for a while, he said. Today he just stopped hiding it. Neither of them asked me to smooth things over. By the next afternoon, the three of us were on speakerphone, talking through the next kid's outing that had supposedly started the mess in the first place. Mallory said, "The cousins still want to go somewhere together. The grandparents do not need to be part of that plan." Graham agreed immediately. We decided the outing would go forward without my parents, and every child would be included, Clara most obviously of all. By noon the next day, the invitation list had changed. My parents were no longer included. We also agreed the original vote no longer counted. If the outing was still happening, every child would get the same say in it this time. They showed up at our house 2 evenings later without calling first, exactly the kind of move people make when they are used to treating access like a birthright. I saw my parents through the front window before I opened the door, Dad rigid with anger, Mom wearing hurt like a prop. Clara was in the den building a blanket fort, so I stepped outside and pulled the door mostly shut behind me. Dad didn't waste time. "You cut off the transfer?" he demanded. Mom jumped in next. "And now your brother and sister are freezing us out of the children's outing like we've done something monstrous." I folded my arms and stayed on the porch. Dad kept going. The deck boards still needed replacing. The water bill was due. They had counted on that money. They had counted on Evan coming by Sunday with tools. Underneath all of it was the real complaint. They had counted on me being too trained to make a consequence stick. "You sabotaged our role as grandparents over one sentence," Mom said. "No," I told her. "You sabotaged it when you decided Clara could be present but not equal." Dad took one step closer, and Evan opened the door behind me. For the first time, they were hearing the sound of something being taken away. My mother tried a different angle when outrage didn't work. She softened her face and said, "Alyssa, we included her. She was invited, wasn't she?" I stared at her for a second because the sentence was so revealing, it almost saved me the trouble of responding. "Being tolerated is not the same as being loved," I said, "and it's not the same as being family." Dad scoffed. "You're acting like we harmed her because we were honest." "No," I said. "You harmed her because you humiliated a 7-year-old in front of a room full of children and called it honesty." Mom crossed her arms. "She isn't blood." There it was again, the sentence they kept wanting to polish into a principle. "Then hear mine," I told them. "Clara doesn't need your permission to stand in a room. She needs the exact same treatment every other child gets. Same welcome, same vote, same care. Nothing less. That was the only standard." Evan stepped fully onto the porch then, shoulder to shoulder with me. "You will not speak about Clara like that here again," he said, low and steady. My parents left angry, but the anger looked thinner now. Even they could hear how small it sounded. A few days later, Mallory, Graham, Evan, and I sat around my dining table with coffee, calendars, and the sort of practical tone families use when they are done pretending confusion is innocence. The kids played in the backyard while we figured out how to keep the cousins connected without giving my parents another stage. Mallory said what everyone had been circling. "Mom and Dad are teaching the kids that some people get treated better because of labels," she said. "I'm not doing that." Graham nodded and pulled up the museum website on his phone. We decided to let the kids vote again in a cousins family thread, properly this time, with the younger ones using our phones. Mallory's oldest typed out the 3 options. Graham's son sent 3 voice notes campaigning for the trampoline park. Clara sat beside me on the banquette and watched the messages come in with wary eyes. "Can I say mine too?" she asked so quietly I almost missed it. "Yes," I said immediately. "Exactly once. Just like everybody else." She looked at my phone, then recorded a tiny voice note that said, "I still pick the amusement park." The first one was barely audible. Her cousin asked her to repeat it. The second time, she spoke up. The museum won, and nobody acted like her vote had been a favor. She had won because she belonged. The museum outing itself was almost boring in the best possible way, which is what safety usually looks like once you've had enough chaos. Clara held hands with her cousins under the giant suspended whale skeleton, argued about which fossil had the biggest teeth, and pressed the button at the weather station. At lunch, Graham's son passed her the chips before taking any for himself. Mallory's girls asked Clara to sit between them for the planetarium show. Twice I caught Clara checking my face before she answered a question, and both times I nodded before she spoke. By the gift shop, she was choosing postcards for herself and one for Evan without that pause. Later that evening, after we got home, and while Clara was inside showing Evan the museum map she had brought back, my parents appeared on the porch again. This time, Mom held a gift bag with a stuffed dinosaur inside. "We may have handled things badly," she said stiffly. Dad added, "Let's not drag this out." I didn't take the bag. "Trying is better than nothing," I said. But one gift doesn't buy immediate access back into Clara's life. Trust gets rebuilt slowly, and only if it's real. Dad's jaw tightened. "Now Mallory and Graham are keeping the other grandkids from us too." "That decision belongs to them, not me," I said. A gift bag was not a bridge. 6 months later, the adoption was final. We took Clara to the courthouse in a navy dress she had picked herself because it made her look official. and the judge smiled when she answered every question with complete seriousness. Afterward, we met Mallory, Graham, their spouses, and all the cousins at a pizza place with long tables and bad acoustics, and Clara kept writing out her full name on 3 paper placemats just because she could. The family that chose her showed up clearly once everyone stopped pretending choice had nothing to do with family. My parents survived without our monthly transfers. They figured out the deck. They paid their own bills. They also learned that centrality is not a permanent job title. We keep them on low contact now. They see us only in limited settings, never unplanned, and never without the standard being obvious. They are more careful, which is not the same as changed, but it is honest. I have not promised them reconciliation. I have left a narrow door open if their effort ever becomes consistent enough to deserve trust. Until then, distance is protection. Last weekend, the cousins started planning an outing over pizza, and Clara raised her hand before anyone else. These days, nobody in my house has to ask whether her vote counts. It does. So tell me, did I do the right thing by standing up for her in front of everyone? And am I doing the right thing by keeping the door open just a little in case they truly change one day?
Hi, thank you so much for watching. Let me know what you thought about the story. Also, I have started narrating my own stories in character. I'm posting them on my other channel, so please check this out.